All right, so first off, is everyone able to see my screen all right? Would a panelist be able to unmute real quick? Okay, awesome, great. So hello and welcome to the second public meeting for the development of a new outdoor classroom space at the Los Peñasquitos Canyon Preserve. We're so thankful that you've taken the time to join us virtually today. I'm Riley DeWitt-Rickards, a park project manager for the County of San Diego Department of Parks and Recreation, and I'll be your virtual guide today and main point of contact for developing this new classroom space. Before we get started, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping notes regarding this Zoom meeting. This meeting is set up as a webinar, so all participants will be muted for the duration of the meeting, but we would love to hear from you. So if you have any questions or comments, please use the Q&A feature as shown on the screen now. We will have someone monitoring this feature and we will answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. And if you're on a mobile device, please see this diagram instead for how to access the Q&A feature. So with that, here's a roadmap for today's presentation. First, we will introduce you to the project team. Then we'll walk through the context of the project and discuss the details about the site itself for those that might be new to the project. Next, I'll review the timeline of what has happened and what will be coming in the future. And then we'll review the survey results from the first public meeting and the survey and discuss how those were incorporated into the current design. And finally, our consultant, Mike Peltz, will walk us through the preliminary concept plan. After all that, we'll have some time for questions and we will let you know how you can submit your feedback on the design. So let's start by meeting the team. The county staff shown on screen will be shepherding this project along, and all of us will be available to answer your questions at the end of this presentation. I'm Riley DeWitt-Rickards, the project manager for the outdoor classroom. We also have Nicole Ravello, our environmental planner, Brandon Schroeder, our region manager for Los Peñasquitos, Jessica Geisler, our marketing and public outreach manager, who will be helping with question moderation at the end of the presentation, and Mike Peltz, the architect working on the project, who will be presenting the conceptual design. So let's move on to the context of the project and look at a site map. The new classroom site is circled here in magenta and is located near the Los Peñasquitos Ranch House. A short distance to the east is the Canyonside Community Park, and to the west is the majority of the Los Peñasquitos Canyon Trail. There is an existing classroom space nearby that includes benches that have been placed in an old cistern that used to serve the ranch. And while this impromptu space has served the community for the time being, we have an opportunity to create a community envisioned space that is formalized, inviting, and ADA accessible so that everyone can enjoy it. The proposed classroom space sits just 100 feet to the west of the existing classroom in a currently unoccupied space near the ranch house. This new space would allow for ADA access as well as seating for about 50 people. The space also features views of the trail and cliffside to the southwest. So let's take a look at where we're headed with this project. The first public meeting was held on May 24th of 2022. An online survey circulated for 2 weeks after the meeting to gather community feedback, and thank you to all who participated. We then proceeded to analyze the surveys and synthesize this information to create a draft concept design, which we'll see later in this meeting. Today marks our second public meeting. We have another online survey circulating. It will be collecting your thoughts from now until December 22nd. We will use this feedback to refine a final concept plan, which we will share during the third public meeting. We will then go into design development of that plan by drafting construction documents. And finally, we will solicit construction bids and move into construction of the project. And you can see this is where we're at right now on the roadmap. So now we'll review some of the survey information that we received after the first public meeting. The survey was open between May 24th and June 10th. 10 individuals completed the online survey. An additional 7 individuals completed a paper survey that was available at the Los Peñasquitos Ride-On event. We additionally received feedback from several in-person conversations and a focus group with a local educational organization that frequents the preserve. Of those that completed the online survey, most were residents of Rancho Peñasquitos or Mira Mesa. So one of the first questions that we asked was, what type of activities do you engage in at the preserve? The majority of respondents visit the preserve to hike, but users also partake in biking, general exercise, educational endeavors, group events, and other activities. One popular question was if the inclusion of shade at the outdoor classroom would increase your likelihood of using it. And the overwhelming response was yes. This was the most unanimous comment we heard throughout the survey and community engagement process, and is definitely something we kept in mind while developing the design. We gave survey respondents the opportunity to select examples that most closely matched their vision of what the outdoor classroom could look like. Responses were varied, but most responses tended toward images that showed wooden natural features. The image that included a shade structure was also popular. The survey also included an opportunity to provide comments about the project in general. The most common request was for the inclusion of shade, with several respondents noting that natural shade would be the most preferred through the inclusion of trees in the area. Other requests included play and active learning opportunities, tables for classroom project use, and the general desire to keep the area natural and matching the surrounding environment. Other comments included the desire for a community garden for kids, operating programming ideas, creative ideas to support shade sales, and a desire for the space to be used for other activities besides outdoor learning. Additionally, one respondent mentioned the concern of snakes being able to enter the space. We will continue to consider the risks associated with encounters with wildlife in the classroom and will determine appropriate mitigation strategies as the project progresses. So the next part is going to be exciting. Looking at the concept design. I'd like to invite Mike Peltz, our consultant and architect for this project, to talk to you a bit about this design and its features. So Mike, if you'd like to take it away.
Thank you, Riley. I don't know, am I on screen now? I can't see on my screen, but
yes, we can see you.
Awesome. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Peltz. I'm a landscape architect working with the county. Let me orient you to this first plan that we've shown. Riley mentioned the need to add an ADA parking space to provide access to the classroom facility. And so you can see that over by the existing barn in the right-hand portion of the plan. And the distance from that space to the classroom facility is about 300 feet. So that is about the length of a football field to get from the parking space to the classroom facility. You can see that we've moved the facility, the outdoor classroom, outside of the existing trees because the footprint of the classroom grew to a point where we wanted to make sure that we saved the existing trees. So we just stayed clear of those and moved it a bit further west. You can see that we've surrounded it or are proposing to surround it with a grove of trees. Eventually, those trees may grow up and provide the shade that Riley mentioned naturally. But on the interim, we're talking about incorporating a shade structure of sorts that we'll get to in a minute to provide that shade from day one. Let's move to the next one. Next slide. This is an enlargement of the outdoor classroom facility. And as you can see, it's bisected by a central spine that provides the access from the ADA parking and from the rest of the rancho to this space. And from that central spine, if you're approaching from the east, on the right-hand side is the outdoor classroom, and it's a terraced structure, I'll call it, but it's got terrace seating with the DG path that leads you into the classroom at, let's call it elevation 0. And then it terraces up on the classrooms to an elevation of 3 feet. And that's about what the contours do on the existing grade. So we're really trying to fit this classroom into the existing contours of the land. So it wasn't going to be standing above it or a whole lot of grading that would create a large pad for this classroom facility. So we're really trying to be aware of what the grades are doing and fit the classroom into the grade. If you are in that central spine area that I mentioned and look to the left, there's a lower, oops, back up one sec. There's a lower outdoor kind of learning experience or project area that if a teacher wanted to do a project on site, there's 6 picnic tables and the students could sit at the picnic tables and do whatever the lesson of the day would be. It's also, I wanted to point out, underneath the trees are several native plants that we're planning to use. Haven't been determined what those might be yet, but we're trying to think ahead of how to make this fit best into the existing site conditions. Okay, now let's move on. I talked about shade, and so our idea would be to create the central spine and have it be a trellis-like structure that would be flat roofed, and then from either side of it, a sloped shade canopy that creates this kind of a similar effect in form to a barn. So there's central spine and then two sloping roof lines on either side of that central spine. And that shade would provide 100% coverage for both the classroom and that outdoor kind of learning area that I'd mentioned. Next slide. This is the elevation as you approach the classroom. You can see the central spine is the post and beam structure that provides shade for that space. And then to either side of it is the sloped shade fabric that provides shade to the outdoor learning area as well as the classroom. And you can see kind of the existing contour slopes from right to left. Uphill is to the right. And the classroom building kind of terraces into that slope. And then the outdoor learning area would also be just a flat pad, but we've introduced two walls on each side of the front and the back to just hold the grade so that we're not disturbing the grade outside of the footprint of the classrooms. Next. This is a section through which I can explain the terracing a little bit better from. And so the dark outline is the outline of the roof or the shade above. You can see that zero level, the central spine is if this were a classroom setting and students were seated, what's the word there? They were sitting on those terraces. They'd be on wood benches, we're thinking something natural looking, and the terraces climb up to an upper level that would be kind of a spillover space if we somehow had more than 50 students there one day. Maybe it's 50 students and 20 parents or something like that. The parents could stand up behind and have plenty of room to not feel crowded out or left out of the experience. Then if you head down the 2.5 feet of steps to the outdoor space learning area, you can see the picnic tables and kind of that flat pad that's created there for that use. Overall, the width of this is about 90 feet and the dimension front to back is about 60 feet. So that is that. And I think I'm done.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mike. It's great to see this and great that we're able to share it with you. We're very excited about this project. So this concludes today's presentation, but I'm always available if you have questions or concerns about the project. Please don't hesitate to give me a call or send me an email. If you have a friend or a neighbor that you think might be interested in participating, please share this presentation and survey link with them and keep an eye out for updates about the project. All updates will be posted on the project webpage, which the link is included on this slide. At this time, we would like to open the meeting up to a questions and answers session. I will turn it over to Jessica Geisler, our Marketing and Public Outreach Manager, to start going over some of the questions that we've received.
Great, thanks, Riley. So far, we actually don't have any questions, which is surprising to me. So I encourage all of the participants on tonight's meeting to let us know, share your comments, your questions, any feedback you have about the site, about the different amenities that Mike pointed out, and also Riley. We're happy to provide answers. We've got members here from our operations team, which is sort of our boots on the ground rangers. We also have resource management on the line. We've got Riley, who's overseeing the project, and then of course, Mike, who's taking care of that design. Oh, good. We've got a couple questions coming through. All right, so the first question is coming from Joe. Joe's asking, is the pedestrian bridge in the geotech report still planned?
That is a great question. Yes. So the pedestrian bridge that's mentioned in the geotech report is not at this site. It's actually nearby. But when we do construction of this project, we may mobilize them at the same time if that's cost effective. So yes is the answer to that. It's just not included as part of the outdoor classroom scope of work.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And then another question from Joe, is there power or lighting that's going to be provided to this outdoor classroom?
That is another great question. And I will, if it's all right, Mike, I think I'd like to toss that one to you for the specifics of the lighting that's going to be there. The short answer is yes, but
So we'd like to minimize the lighting. Of course, we want the classroom area to be safe at night. And this time of year, it gets dark so early that we need some kind of lighting. We're exploring the idea of possibly using solar light so that we're not bringing utilities out to the site and trying to create a fairly minimal footprint for the project. But yeah, it's in the works. We just don't know what it looks like yet, but it's something we have thought about.
Great, thanks, Mike. All right, so Anne is saying, it seems like all the trees are going to be on the edges. Can we talk a little more about the placement of all of those trees and if they are all on the edges or if there'll be any within that outdoor classroom?
Absolutely. I think if it's all right, Mike, I'll start with this one, and then if you'd like to add anything, absolutely. So first off, we love to get feedback. So if you have any comments about the tree placement, anything like that, please make sure to check out the survey because we would love to get that information from you. But regarding the tree placement as it currently is, some of the inspiration came from the history of the ranch house. There used to be an orchard on site, so it's sort of alluding to that sort of design. So that's sort of how you have this sort of geometric placement around the site, with it becoming a little bit more wild as you approach the actual preserve. So that's the sort of what we've been going for, but again, we love to get feedback, and if you're interested in seeing trees in other places, please let us know. Mike, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
The only thing I'd like to add is as you get towards the trail, the existing trail, there are some existing, I believe they're sycamores that we will respect and keep. The diagram kind of shows us planting on top of those, but don't be alarmed. Those trees there are gonna remain. And if they take the place of some of these green trees that we've drawn, then that's even better. Also to the point of, are there trees anywhere else? There could be a nice specimen tree in the center behind where the teacher or a lecturer or whatever would be speaking in that central spine space. It would just break the overhead shade trellis and let more sunlight in. So that would be the consideration. But yeah, certainly would be open to any ideas you might have.
Great, thank you. All good stuff to put in that survey. One thing I wanted to point out is that we do still have a working orchard on site, definitely smaller than it used to be way back in the day when that was a working ranch, but I believe it's operated by a nonprofit organization, and all of the fruit that's grown is actually put to good use to support local San Diegans. So we do what we can to kind of try to keep that spirit alive. I actually have more questions about trees, so I'm just going to continue on that topic if that's okay.
Great.
So this next one comes from Anne. Anne is asking, will the shade later be from trees or always from the shade fabric? And what's the life of a shade cloth? Great question.
Yeah, definitely great questions. And this will probably be one that I'll start with and maybe actually throw to Brandon, because I know we've talked a bit about the sort of operations maintenance aspects of this. So yes, the idea is that as these trees grow, it definitely could become that the shade for the space is provided by the natural trees. But as we know, trees take a little while to grow, so that's why the shade cloths are at least a temporary measure. Depending on, feedback that we receive or maintenance considerations, it's possible that those shade cloths could stay, but we definitely see a future where the trees provide enough shade that they're no longer needed. As for how long shade cloths last, again, Brandon, please also feel free to give feedback on this. I believe it's typically 5 years, give or take. It depends on the conditions, depends on how much use they're getting, things like that.
Agreed. Yeah, conditions that if it's real windy, a little, not great. In my experiences, at best, maybe 10 years. But yeah, like you said, having a fabric shade over that part gives us some flexibility that if the trees are growing in and providing adequate shade over time, it'd be pretty easy to just remove the fabric.
Thank you, Brandon.
All right, we have another tree question here. So the trees that we're planting in that area, do we know what the mature size of those trees might be and how long it takes them to get to different heights?
Another great question. I love all of these tree questions. The answer is we won't know for sure until we decide what trees they'll be. So that's something that will be decided through the design process, sort of the spacing that we have available, water considerations, all of those types of things that go into the selection of the tree species themselves. So we don't know quite yet exactly how big the trees will be. But again, if you have any thoughts or questions about that, feel free to, ask questions here because it's a Q&A. But if you have any thoughts, please reach out to me or fill out the survey as well about tree things.
Is this an environment that could be good for Engelmann or coast live oaks? This is coming from Anne.
That is a great question, and I am not familiar enough with the species to know for sure. Maybe one of our panelists knows. I don't know if anybody.
Yeah, Nicole,
Yes.
you want to take that one?
Absolutely. So those are both excellent choices that we will consider in this area. When we select our trees, of course, that is an aesthetic issue as well that we consider, but mostly we handle our county arborist. So we have a lovely county arborist on staff, and he will assess the soil quality to make sure that we're choosing trees that will survive in the long term, providing adequate shade or not requiring much maintenance from our park staff. So they'll do an assessment once the design stage is finalized, and then we'll move from there. So we don't have a short list of what tree species yet, but we always appreciate any ones that you guys like. I know we have lots of willow in this area as well as sycamore, and the riparian area gives us a lot of options to work with, thankfully. So we'll keep those Engelmann and coast live oaks in mind.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicole. And it's probably important to note too that we have a heritage tree program here at the county. We actually catalog all of our existing heritage trees. And we're also very actively trying to replenish San Diego's dwindling tree canopy. So wherever we see a tree that's lost, we try to replant it 3 to 1. And so you'll see those efforts at parks kind of all across San Diego. We plant thousands a year. That's definitely a top priority for us, and trying to keep those trees native to this environment is especially important. So excellent tree questions. I'm actually really excited to see what types of trees we select for that final design. So thank you guys for that information. This is a question for ops. I don't know, Brandon, if you could help me with this one, but do we have any examples of properties that have outdoor classrooms that have mature trees? One I'm thinking that could potentially fit this bill is Sycamore Canyon with their kind of outdoor arena area. Live Oak might be an option, but are there any other parks that have an outdoor classroom that would show what that would look like with those mature trees providing shade?
Those are the first two that kind of stood out to me too.
Okay.
There's the Santa Isabel Nature Center. It has kind of an outdoor space, but that's all really that's only a couple of years old. So whatever new was built there isn't mature yet. Let me keep thinking. If anything else comes to mind, I'll put it in the chat.
Great.
But yeah, Live Oak is a good one. That one's been there for a while, and that's a good one to compare it to. Same with Sycamore Canyon.
Yeah, Sycamore Canyon, I was there recently and it was very shady, almost too shady. I wanted some sunshine on a cold day. So that's a great option if you're not too far away from Poway. If you want to do a little hike down to the nature center, you can check out what that nature or education center looks like. And I imagine there'll be a lot of similarities to this property. That was commenting on a question that came through from Anne, just to see if there's a way to project what this might look like with mature trees in the future. All right, so we have a question here about the size of the trees that we plant. This is coming from Joe. Are these trees intended as 24-inch box trees to start, or substantially larger for quicker shade opportunities? Great tree question. Riley, you want to start with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, another great tree question. And again, will probably be fleshed out more as we continue with design. Mike, let me know if you have any preliminary thoughts about this. But we really want to make sure that we have an understanding of what space we have to work with, and to make sure that this concept design is what the community wants before we dive too deep into the specific trees and the progression of those trees. But great question. I love all of these tree questions. Oh, and it looks like Brandon has hand up as well.
Just a quick add on to that, if I may.
Mhm.
If we were to go with larger, if we were to take that many trees and try to put in a 50 or 60-inch box, big ones that you're dropping in with the crane and everything, just keep in mind that would up the cost pretty significantly for this many trees. Plus the rate of survival for those big trees is lower so the trade-off is, it's more patience on all of our parts to wait for them to grow in, but they'll have a better chance in the long run.
Mhm.
If they're more
Absolutely.
like maybe like a 24-inch box or something.
And we're hoping that the inclusion of the shade sails helps a bit with that, being able to wait, providing that temporary shade until the grove has had a chance to really grow in.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it looks like Anne agrees that smaller trees establish better to a site and a healthier life, 24 inches max. So great feedback, guys. Thank you. All right, so this is connected to trees as well. Is there an existing irrigation system on site that this would be potentially tapping into?
That is another great question. So this, for anyone who is less familiar with the sort of site that we're looking at. So the ranch house is down below, and these, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but these are the animal pens right here. This site off to the side that we're building on is pretty, there isn't anything there, so it would be adding a new system. So that is something that we'd have to look at, but there is the community garden over here. There's stuff nearby.
There's
And
a line, there's a water line we can tap into right next to where the goats and the
yeah,
chickens are.
right around here.
That's there's one there we could probably extend from.
All right, we had a comment in here about the survey. We did post it in the chat. So if anybody can let me know if you can't see that in the chat. We can also, follow up after this meeting with a link to it, but the survey is now live. So hopefully you can access it in the chat. If not, just let us know and we'll make sure that is sent your direction. We'll also post it to our website, sdparks.org.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this one's about ADA compliance. Frank is asking or saying, trying to figure out how the ADA compliance guideline works with all of the stairs. Is everything on site accessible?
That is a great question, Frank. Mike, would you like to talk a little bit? I will zoom in a bit. Would you like to talk about the ADA accessibility through the site?
You bet. And that is a good question. So if you look at this plan, as you approach the facility, if you turn to the left, right there is an ADA access ramp down to the lower level. And that would be the way to get in and out if you got a sore knee or or whatever it might be, you take that route to get up and down into that space. If you're attending something in the classroom area, the thinking was that if you look there where the 0-foot elevation mark is in that space, kind of where the teacher might stand or the person talking might stand, and then look to the right, the first line you encounter would be a space for ADA facilities. So if you were in a wheelchair, you would simply roll at grade to that space and set right there, which is a great seat to listen to the lecture. So The ADA for the terrace step area is at grade at the 0 elevation, and there's the access ramp to get down to the 2.5 foot lower level. Hope that makes sense.
Yes, thanks so much, Mike. That was a great walkthrough of ADA in this space.
Yeah, thank you. And that's definitely another top priority for us. Whenever we build a new recreation space, that's on that list of things that must be accomplished for us to open that area. So thank you for sharing that. All right, so we have a couple of comments from Elizabeth. It says Palomar College is excavating the site of a structure built in the late 1900s, just north of where the outdoor classroom will be. And so our question is, will there be a CRM report done before you build? She's actually with Palomar College Archaeology Program that's working on excavating the knoll. So this one I want to hand over to Nicole on the resource management team.
Thank you. Yes, with our resource management team, this will apply to CEQA as well as PQ, or Rancho Peñasquitos as we know it, is a culturally significant site. Therefore, every time we dig into this area, we do a historic background. We actually usually hire out our consultant to do a updated check to make sure that there's any resources within that area. So we would look at your excavation site, make sure if there's a site that needs to be expanded, that we have that accounted for within our documents. And then any ground disturbance that will be happening because of this project, we'll make sure to have a cultural monitor on site as well as a Native American monitor.
Great, thank you. And Nicole, I imagine that we'll have the contact information for that cultural monitor. So, you know, organizations that like potentially that Elizabeth worked for would be able to reach out to them if they had any questions or concerns, or would you have that stuff go directly through you?
That would come directly through us just because cultural sites are of specific significance. So we don't want to publicize that information. So if you do have the correct credentials, we are more than willing to share. However, we do have to consider all artifacts as confidential. So you would be looping with me once construction begins or is about to begin, but more than happy to talk offline.
Great, thank you. Nicole, if you want to put your info in the chat too, that would be super helpful, I think, for anybody who's interested in those types of pieces of information. All right, so I got Joe's question. He was asking about that survey. Hopefully that link came through in the chat. Another question that Joe had is, will the drainage of this area sheet flow to the south and join the existing native areas? Probably another resource management question for Nicole, or is that something, Riley, that you've been looking into with Mike?
That's an interest.
Oh, no, just, do you want me to repeat the question or?
Oh, no, I just,
Okay.
That's an interesting one because it's sort of an intersection, right, of things. And that's going to be something, again, that we get into more during the more in-depth design, but definitely something that we want to keep in mind for this area. And Mike, let me know if you have any additional comments to add to that, but definitely something to keep in mind. And thank you for asking. And thank you for considering and being concerned.
Okay, another comment here. Our question, has the conceptual design been validated with a conceptual budget estimate? So to speak to our budget for the project, I'll hand that one over to Riley.
Yes, absolutely. That is definitely something that we've had to work within this project, keeping within project budget limits. So our estimated budget for this project is $700,000. So that's the sort of constraint that we're working within.
Awesome. Okay, that right now is the last question I have. I'll give you guys a chance to think of anything else that might pop up while you have all the experts on the line. Riley, do you want to just real quick go over next steps from here?
Yes, absolutely. And I will also just pop back to the slide with my contact information in case anybody wants to jot that down. So next step from here is the survey is going to be open for 2 weeks. please fill out the survey, give us your thoughts. The survey will also have the plans that we just went over included. So even if you'd just like to see the plans again, that all of those will be available in that survey link. So after that 2 weeks, we're going to compile that data and take a look at it and incorporate feedback into our considerations for the final design. Then we'll go back out to the community for another public meeting when we're ready to present that final conceptualized design before we move into construction documents and eventually construction. Oop. Sorry, my slides keep getting away from me for some reason. I feel like it just keeps clicking itself. So those are our next steps. But in the meantime, absolutely reach out to me. I love to talk if you would like a phone call. And we also have a listserv. So if you'd like to stay up to date on project updates, I can add you to that. So anytime we have a public meeting or any news comes out about the project, I'll send out an email and you'll receive it.
Great. Well, thank you, Riley. I still don't see anything in here, so I appreciate the opportunity to chat with everybody and to host the Q&A portion of this meeting. I am going to turn down my video and sound and hand it over to the team for final comments.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So thanks again, everyone, for attending today. And absolutely, we want to stay in touch and we want to hear your feedback. So definitely reach out via that survey or to me directly through email and let your friends and family, neighbors, anyone who may be interested in this project know, and feel free to share the link with them as well. And with that, I hope everyone has a great evening and we look forward to seeing you more as this project progresses. Thanks so much.